Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. This Tuesday in Brussels and Strasbourg, European leaders are discussing what to do in the wake of the Lampedusa tragedy, boat of African migrants. 274, the latest death toll there, killed in that boat capsizing off the coast there of that island that belongs to Italy. With us to talk about it from Strasbourg, Dutch member of the European Parliament from the Greens, Judith Sargentini. Welcome back as well to Hans Lucht. The connection is back with Copenhagen, anthropologist. And
I can hear you now.
You can hear me now, great. And the author of Darkness Before Daybreak, African Migrants Living on the Margins in Southern Italy. Also with us, Laurent of the Eurosceptic neo-Gaullist Debout, La République party, and from the France 24 International Affairs desk, Annette Young. We were talking just before the break, and Judith Sargentini, I'll start with you. When you look at where these migrants want to go, what does it tell you about what Europe should do?
Europe should be a real solidaire Europe that shares the burden of the refugee coming to the European Union among the 28 member states. I refuse to believe that European citizens do not want to give shelter to political refugees or people fleeing from war. If we can share economics, if we can share a coin, we have to share this as well. And I do plea also with the European ministers, not only those from Italy and Greece, but particularly those from Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, to show that they understand that they do not only have to help refugees, but also their colleagues in Italy and Greece and Malta by taking over these refugees.
Laurent Pinsolle, do you agree?
Sharing, I think there should be a limit. There should be a limit for the safety of the asylum seekers, because if they feel that the more they come, the more they are going to be able to live in Europe, more are going to come, and we are going to have more tragedies. And second point, we need to have a political consensus among European populations, and right now there is no consensus to have more people, and that's understandable. Europe cannot say you must pay more taxes, you must get fewer social security benefits, and then you need to have more asylum seekers and take care of them. It's not possible.
Hans Lucht, let me ask you on this issue. I know that in the op-ed piece that you wrote about, you were alarmed by the fact that later this year, officials in Brussels are expected to unveil a new border surveillance system for the European Union called Eurosur.
I lost you there again. I'm sorry.
Oh, we're not having much luck. Can you hear us now?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay. I was saying that you are alarmed by the fact that later this year, officials in Brussels are due to unveil a new border surveillance system called Eurosur.
I'm saying right now, I think the populations of Europe and also politicians are looking at this terrible tragedy and thinking, are we about to use millions of euros taxpayer money on more surveillance, more control, more police, when what is needed is a way to save these people who are in distress on the sea. And let me just add that the numbers we are seeing coming over the Mediterranean are small. They're a fraction of the total number of people coming into Europe every year. And it's well within the capacity of the European Union to deal with them and make sure that their lives are safe, and also to make sure that they have a possibility to seek asylum. I'm worried about the whole security paradigm being put down over the migrants and refugees. And I'm worried about how European leaders want to externalize or outsource asylum procedures to third countries like Libya, who clearly has a very, very bad record on human rights.
All right, you mentioned Libya.
Can I come in by...
Sure, go ahead, Judith Sargentini.
Because we're voting on Eurosur coming Thursday, and I agree a lot with what Mr. LUCHT says, because we're putting up a technical system that actually only gives us more information on how to keep refugees out of the European Union instead of helping them to a safer place. And in the meantime, we've built a wall, a fence between the Turkish and the Greek border, which allows people not anymore to come in via land. It forces them to go for the more insecure road of the sea. And we've seen more people drowning now between Turkey and Greece again. And what do? 600 million euros for a technical application that actually is only needed to point out to other countries, refugees are coming our way, help us stop them. The Greens are not going to vote in favor, I think.
On its website, they're saying 244 million for the period from 2014 to 2020 for this Eurosur surveillance system. Is it money well spent?
Yes, I think
No,
it's not a big amount. When we look at the European budget for 6 or 7 years, I think it's $1 trillion euros. So that's not much.
The reality
and
is,
if it prevents people from coming, because they will know that it's going to be harder to come, then we will have less tragedies.
Doesn't stop them coming.
It
doesn't
will never.
Exactly.
Of course. But
and the reality is, while we have a global financial crisis and we have Western wealthy countries and we have those on the periphery which are clearly struggling economically, you are always going to have people who are wanting to take a risk, who will pay thousands of dollars or euros or whatever to a smuggler to bring them across the waters. And I can speak as an Australian as well as somebody who lives in Europe. I mean, in Australia, people will risk an extraordinary journey through shark-infested waters from places as far afield as Afghanistan, Iraq and Iran. Maybe because they're political refugees, maybe because they're economic migrants, but primarily because they want a better life. However, I think, coming back to what I was saying earlier, the problem here in Europe is lack of consensus. And the reality is, for instance, Frontex has had its budget slashed, I think, somewhere close to 30-40% in the last 3 years. This is the Warsaw-based agency which has been tasked with the responsibility of going out there and doing these search and rescue operations. And clearly they're struggling too. And now they're turning around at this meeting and saying to other European governments, all right, guys, time to cough up more money. Well, I suspect the answer will be, no, sorry, we just physically cannot.
All right, we still don't have the outcome of that meeting.
We don't know, but I would argue very likely that will be the case.
The Tunisian captain of that boat that sank off of Lampedusa has been arrested. The tragedy, by the way, throwing the spotlight on criminal networks that prey on migrants for their smuggling. And landing in Europe is really only the last leg of a perilous journey. If we see here on the map, they have to go through, Hans Lucht, help us out with this. They have to go through Ethiopia, Sudan, Egypt.
Yes. The problem here is especially the Sahara Desert. Crossing the Sahara Desert is probably as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than crossing the Mediterranean. And every year, thousands, not thousands, but over the years, thousands of people have died this way, uncountable numbers. We don't even know how many because there's no public scrutiny, there's no people keeping numbers in those deserted areas of Africa. And so we have to consider the fact that even before they hit the transit countries and the boats for Europe, many have perished along the way already. And let me just add to the whole control and beefing up Frontex discussion. There is no evidence to suggest that if you beef up Frontex and if you employ more technology, that people will stop coming. On the contrary, we see that people seek out new routes, that new routes appear, and they seek out more desperate measures, more desperate ways of coming to Europe. So in fact, we should question whether the whole control and surveillance issue is really helpful when it comes to stopping migrants and refugees.
Hans Lucht, you mentioned earlier Libya and how to assist the host countries with these problems. To get a sense of the scope, our Libya correspondent, Mohammed Najim, filmed this report, read by Luke Schrago.
Hundreds of illegal African migrants grouped together in a Libyan port. They were caught after crossing the desert on their way to Europe. And these days, Libya's become a major transit point for migrants to get overseas, leaving the nation's coast guard badly stretched.
Despite our feeble means, and according to statistics that we have, we were able to help more than 3,000 illegals in Libyan waters between the months of July and the end of September, with Italy's help.
Migrants are constantly arriving from across the continent, whether overland or by boat from the Horn of Africa. The smugglers are highly organised, hard to track, and care little for what happens to their passengers.
Illegal immigrants are tricked by smugglers who use what amount to nothing more than leaky tubs. When we get to them to help, we find them exhausted because they have no experience at sea.
Once apprehended, illegal migrants are sent to detention centres like this one. For some, Europe was never the final destination. They want to stay and work in Libya.
I judge the ones that go to Europe. I see them as people who know nothing. I couldn't cross the sea by getting into a boat just to kill myself. There's life in Africa too. I love Africa and my family, and I don't want to go to Europe for years and lose all that time for nothing.
Given a rising tide of such migrants, Libya's struggling to monitor its borders, a situation that only worsened following the Gaddafi regime's downfall 2 years ago.
Judith Sargentini, what should Europe be doing to crack down on these smugglers who prey on these migrants and asylum seekers?
It's smugglers, they're criminals. But I also have a counter question. If you are a refugee and you want to enter the European Union and you're not allowed to knock on the door of a European embassy outside of the European Union to ask for asylum, how do you get here? You can only put your fate in the hands of the smugglers and pay 1,500, 2,000 euros for that boat. So we can
I believe that's the
go
suggestion.
after
I believe
these
that's the
criminals.
suggestion that's been put forward by Sweden, to have a common procedure.
Well, I would back that up a lot. I think it would be good if we first of all invite much more refugees that are in UNHCR camps. For instance, still in Tunisia, 4,000 people are waiting. They fled from Libya, and before that they fled from Eritrea and Sudan and so on, and they have nowhere to go. We can end that camp in Tunisia and take those 4,000 refugees and house them in the European Union. But second, let's get asylum possibilities in our embassies, because the only way to stop people entering a boat and they're choosing between the bullet and the sea is to give them another option. It's not us pulling these people, they're being pushed away. And I know how difficult it is. I've been to Sicily, I've been to Lampedusa, I've been to Athens. It's horrific. And still, it's a choice above where they come from.
Céline Bardet, who is often a guest on our show, human rights lawyer, tweeting to us, we should focus on organized crime and traffickers that are developing huge business out of illegal migration. Judith Sargentini.
Can I comment on that?
Go ahead, Hans Lucht.
Yeah, I've done a lot of research among migrants who have done hundreds of interviews with migrants, and also people who have worked on the boats as captains. Often the boats are not driven by smugglers, but by migrants themselves, who get a free ride by volunteering to take a boat across. And what they're telling me is that very often the Libyan authorities are deeply involved in the smuggling process. So I'm kind of amused when I hear these Libyan authority figures speaking out, when in fact many times it's the Libyan police or the Libyan Navy that is involved in the smuggling. Secondly, I would say that these human smugglers do not fool Africans to believe that this trip is not risky, that is not dangerous, that some kind of El Dorado is waiting on the other side of the sea. Africans really newspapers, they watch television, they know very well that this is a very dangerous journey, and the whole idea is a bit condescending, actually. What we should focus on is the reason for why they're coming, not the whole idea that they're being fooled into coming by some criminal network.
When you, I want to pick up from what you said there and ask, Judith Sargentini was mentioning those Eritreans who are fleeing a very repressive regime, 4,000 of them. She's saying, let them in.
We have some asylum seekers that are coming every year in France. I think it's around 30,000. So
but those are numbers. Here are human beings. Here are real people. They're there, 4,000 of them in Tunisia. Should we let them in?
We should discuss. I think one of our proposals, for example, is to say each year we need to put a maximum number for asylum seeker. So of course France will have to take its share, but it's a share that needs to be debated and that needs to be agreed with the population and also with the parliament.
And should there be, like the Swedish are suggesting, a common European policy when it comes to asylum seekers so that you could go to the French consulate in Tunis and...
I'm completely against that. I think we need... First point, I don't think we can agree at 28 countries on a single and united policy, and that's what we are seeing right now, with 24 countries opposing the new proposal. I think we need to have a confidence, and we need to know our frontier, know who is coming in, who is coming out, in order to make some decision. When we do not have the control of our frontiers, then people tend to be more frightened and more conservative, because there is no control.
Worse than than the idea of a queue jumper, or to put it in American English, jumping the line. And that's something that politicians can play on very easily. It's just a couple of points I want to make. First of all, the EU is touting very much this thing they call the mobility partnership, which they have with the Moroccan government, that basically in return for giving more visas to Moroccan students, the Moroccans in turn have been asked to do their fair share in preventing migrants from leaving their shores. However, human rights groups have been saying that that has not actually been done in a fair and respectable manner in terms of possible human rights abuses being carried out by officials in order to prevent people from getting on boats. So it's an extraordinary complicated problem. It goes, it extends across the across the whole scale in terms of officials, be it in Libya, be it in Eritrea, be it in Somalia, all on the take. I mean, it is not so much a European problem, it's a global problem between wealthy countries and those who are not so wealthy.
And it brings us back to the suggestion that you made at the beginning of this show, which was that there should be some kind of Marshall Plan for Africa. Judith Sargentini, we've seen the Millennium Goals. We know that the EU is already a huge donor of aid to the continent itself. In the long run, though, how do you tailor that policy so that you really do have some kind of you give people a reason not to come to Europe and work in precarious conditions?
Well, aid is not going to do it, honestly. We are indeed the biggest financer of development aid to Africa, but we're also still the biggest trader, and we're not trading fair, and we're not investing fair, and we still block our markets for products from Africa. And I think what would really help to make Africa prosper and to stop the need for economic migration, not forbid it, but to stop the need as much as possible, is fair trading and fair investment, which means that we will import agricultural products that maybe French farmers are not so happy with. But that's the way you develop Africa, real fair and global trade.
You're shaking your head.
I don't agree at all. We do not...
Well, we know, for instance,
no,
reports...
I thought so.
Reports have proven, for instance, that raw materials that are coming out of Africa, that we're paying under the odds for what their real value is.
I think the problem with Africa is that Africa has opened its borders too much.
under the pressure of international lending
Exactly,
institutions.
and under the pressure of Europe, too much free trade is dangerous for Africa because the wages are not that much higher in Asia, and Africa's infrastructure and economic structures are not strong enough to fight within the world competition.
We do agree.
And yes, for that we will agree.
Because
and what Joseph Stiglitz said in The Great Disillusion, they need to protect their industry, their agriculture, in order to grow and to strengthen themselves. The global competition is too hard for Africa.
Judith Sargentini.
I agree. Africa should have the right to protect their markets against our products if they're still building their markets. But I'm talking about the other way around. We're blocking our markets for African products and we're buying it up too cheap. For instance, we do not have import taxes on raw materials, but we do on processed goods, which means that we can do the work and Africa can only provide us with raw materials where the real employment is in produced products. That's what I mean with fair trade and fair investment.
All right, it's a topic, of course, we're going to continue to follow. Judith Sargentini, I want to thank you very much for joining us from the European Parliament in Strasbourg. I want to thank Hans LUCHT in Copenhagen for being with us, Laurent PINSOLLE, Annette Young. There's one person before we say goodbye we haven't said hello to, Olivia Salazar-Winspear. It's our Media Watch segment. Olivia, you've been looking at the Italian newspapers, I believe.
Indeed. So obviously, a lot of the editorials very accusatory with regards to Brussels, starting with Il Foglio. They have this article pointing their finger saying it's not the fault of the migrants nor Italy. This is Brussels being completely unaware of the scale of the problem of illegal immigration. They point out that this problem goes beyond sovereignty. The only legislation that could work would be union-wide. There's no point looking at Italy. And they bring up this argument that this division we've seen between Northern and Southern Europe. They say Italy, Greece, Malta and Spain are the countries affected. People legislating or not legislating enough, ignoring the problem in the north of Europe, they need to sit up and take notice because we're the countries affected. And there's this, as it's never better illustrated in this interactive map, saying where the highest amount of death or disappeared people are, and it's all off the coast of North Africa. It's very, very much concentrated in southern Europe. You see nothing really above Naples. So, I mean, that shows the statistics quite obviously. 24 Ore, Il Sole, it's another Italian paper, they bring Spain into this debate, quoting the El País article where they say this is the result of Fortress Europe. This is because controls are too tight. Now, just to recap, El País had a very controversial headline and front page saying only the dead can stay, of course referring to this very sad fact that the victims of this accident were given citizenship by Prime Minister Enrico Letta to be buried on the island. So they're saying this is how you get into Europe. Another very shocking, provocative headline from Vittorio Longhi, writing for The Guardian, an Italian journalist. He says the Lampedusa boat sinking was no accident. He said this incident should have and could have been prevented. He calls the Mediterranean a graveyard in his article, and he points the finger at the far right, politicians in his country, Italy, like the Northern League, who've whipped up xenophobia and anti-immigrant feeling to create a climate that's so hostile to immigration reform that he says it's very hypocritical of Italian right-wing politicians to point the finger at Brussels, because he says they're at fault as well. Now, speaking of the far right, if we just go to France here with another very provocative front page. This is Charlie Hebdo. It's a magazine that comes out weekly here, very much on the left. If I just translate slightly this headline, it says, the Mediterranean is now applying the Front National's programme with a caricature of Marine Le Pen now. This is very far-fetched. They're basically trying to align the two ideas, which is potentially libelous, of course. They don't shy away from this kind of front cover. But again, pointing the finger at far-right politics in Europe.
All right, and meanwhile, there's another country that's trying to keep out migrants of a different sort.
Yes, migrants of a different sort. Kuwait says it's now going to screen expatriates coming to the country, well, the Gulf cooperation countries, to detect if they are homosexual or not. Now, this was reported in a regional paper, Gulf News. Now, that's a paper published in Dubai where homosexuality is illegal, along with all the other Gulf cooperation countries. There's no details.
I was going to say, how would they screen you to find out?
There is absolutely no detail in this article about how they propose to do this. Sadly, there's a lot of speculation online saying we think this will just be an HIV test. It will sadly be a blood test, which conflates HIV testing with homosexuality. Wrong, of course, but of course it gave rise to lots of jokes on the internet. People saying Kuwait thinks its gaydar is good enough to ban gays.
All right, Olivia Salazar-Winspear, I want to thank you. I want to thank our panel, and we want to thank you for joining us here for the France 24 debate. Stay with us, much more to come right here on France 24.